Hey, what is going on, guys? Project Flux Season 4 has recently launched, so in today's video I want to talk about my first impressions and some general key information I think you should know. So we'll talk about general info in terms of server/modes, we'll then talk about how easy it was to get set up, we'll then move into discussing the overall meta and what weapons are viable in this current state, we'll then move into some needed features that I really do hope will get added soon, and then finally, we'll discuss the differences against EZFN Season 4 to help you decide which one might be the right choice for you if you're struggling to decide between the two. Okay, first off, general info. So EU and NA servers do both exist. I know some people were struggling to get into NA servers. I was able to play a few games on NA, so they are there. There just might be some issues with the launch, but hopefully those will get resolved. Solos and duos, I tested both of those modes, and they are working right now. Squads, I was able to queue in, but since duos already had pretty low player counts, I didn't bother queuing into a squads game fully. I would say right now, even if squads is running, the player count is likely too low to really be enjoyable. So solos and duos is really going to be where it's at, in particular solos. Playground should also be coming, but from what I understand, Playground is not available at this time, but hopefully that will come soon. The one thing, though, is, the more modes they add, the more it's going to spread the player base. So hopefully, they're smart with what modes they have and consider disabling certain modes when new ones come in. Maybe only have 2 modes at a time, whatever those 2 might be. Now, moving into the ease of setup, it was overall pretty easy. It's very similar to how Flux Season 8 was set up. You can pretty much follow a Flux Season 8 tutorial. I have one, several other people have made one. If you're unsure on how to do it, I can make a Season 4 tutorial if you guys would like to see that, but the process is pretty much the same. Instead of downloading 8.5 when you download 4.5. But overall, pretty much the same process. Pretty easy. I did run into an issue where it wouldn't let me launch initially, but just doing a simple file verification fixed that problem. So if you're having that problem, maybe try that. Now, let's move into the overall meta and how powerful I think certain weapons are. So first off, the drum gun I could not find in any of the games I played. I don't think the drum gun currently exists. And the drum gun would have been, I think, the best weapon in the game. That thing had 243 DPS, 50-round magazine. Yes, it wasn't the most accurate, but it wasn't as terrible as you'd think it would be. It's more accurate in Season 4 than later on. The damage fall-off isn't that bad. It would have been very powerful, and I think it would have tipped the scales between shotguns and SMGs in favor of SMGs. And I frequently see people say that, hey, the drum gun is technically an AR. That is true, Season 9 and beyond, but at this point in the game, last I checked, it should be an SMG class, and honestly, I think the drum gun plays much more like an SMG than it does an AR, so I'm just going to, kind of group it with the tactical and silence SMG. However, the drum gun doesn't exist right now, so this creates an interesting situation where I think the balance between shotguns and SMGs is almost 50-50. I think it's viable to run double SMG, shotgun and SMG, or double shotgun. I think you can go either way. If we look at the shotguns, the pump and tac I definitely think are still good options, but not as strong as you may think they are. The pump only does 80-85. Both of them have 2.0 headshot multiplier. Both of them got a wall damage nerf. They do like 50-ish wall damage. So, they're still good options, but they're not incredible like they are in, say, EZFN Season 4, where they're overall stronger. The heavy shotgun, though, against EZFN Season 4 has barely been adjusted. It's gotten a minor wall damage nerf to around 77, 80-ish. Against having 100, that is a nerf, but still has a 2.5x headshot multiplier. I think the heavy shotgun is overall the best shotgun. I would recommend running that if you can find it. In terms of your SMGs, TAC SMG is incredibly powerful. It does 2 more damage than EZFN Season 4, which means you're pulling 260 DPS with the purple variant, which is honestly ridiculous. It deletes enemy players if you have reasonable aim, because it's reasonably accurate. You can just shred through builds, you shred through players. It's incredibly strong. Silence SMG against EZFN Season 4 also does 2 more damage, and it's more accurate as well. So this thing is a good SMG and a great AR as well. It's got not that bad damage fall off. The green one does 23 base damage, still does 15 at long range, and it's got a very snappy first shot accuracy reset time. So you can totally use this thing as an AR. It's also a very competitive SMG. And there's other options like the LMG, which I think is just alright. But I think when you put those 2 together, you can see that both the shotguns and SMGs, I think, are overall pretty equally competitive. You could really go either way. And what this means is that there's well over a dozen possible combinations of double shotgun, shotgun SMG, double SMG. It's very free, and you can kind of run whatever you want. AR meta I also think is pretty good. Standard AR is probably your best option, particularly the Scar. But Scoped AR and Burst AR are also competitive. And the Silence SMG, even though it's an SMG, can also really compete in the AR class as well. And that thing is very competitive. You've got Hunting Rifle and Bolt, both competitive snipers. You've got RPG and grenade launch. I think RPG is probably a little bit better, but grenade launch is still viable too. And even the minigun in a team mode could be useful. So I think overall this meta is overall pretty good. Yes, there are some busted weapons. TAC SMG is probably a bit strong, but it's overall pretty free and diverse. Okay, let's move into some needed features that I really hope will get added. First off, I think we should have native support for the custom binds mod for controller and sprint by default for all inputs. There is ways to get these features added into your game, but really it should just be a built-in feature. What would be ideal, in fact, is if it's like EZFN, where sprint by default you can activate in the game. That would be ideal. It should be there for everybody. Yes, it's non-historical to have sprint by default, but I find it a little bit hard to understand the argument of, yeah, you should have to manually press sprint every time. That's just really annoying, and I don't think that's great. I think that should be added. Now, things like edit on release, I think are a little bit more arguable, because, yeah, it's nice to have edit on release, but you could argue that it'll make the average player better, make building faster. You could see that as a positive or negative. I can kind of understand the argument there for why you'd want to on or off, but like things like sprint by default, I think should just be there, well, by default. Another thing is, once again, I just want to repeat this, considering dropping modes, if they're really going to add playgrounds, they really, really should consider dropping modes when they add playgrounds. You know, maybe for a week you have solos and playgrounds, then maybe for another week you have solos and duos, and then solos and squads, right? Only really having 2 modes, I think, is probably where it's going to be at to make sure there's enough players in each mode. If they do too many modes, a lot of them are just going to be dead. So that's what I would say there. Finally, I think they should try and add Siphon as possible. Yes, Siphon is not historical. I can see the argument for slowing down the pace of the game without Siphon, but I think Siphon is a nice thing to have. And remember, Siphon is not just an on-off switch. It's a gradient, right? You could do 25 Siphon. You could do 50 Siphon. You could do 75 Siphon, right? You have the levers to play around with how aggressive players will want to be. So I think they should try playing with that and see when it works. If you think back to like Project Nexus Season 8, even going from 0 mats on elimination to 20 made a big difference. And I really do think they should try playing with that lever a little bit. Finally, let's talk about comparing against EZFN Season 4. In terms of your advantages, Flux, you have more servers and more modes. You also have generally more working features, like more the challenges work, that kind of thing, working battle pass. Generally, more of that stuff works, the progression it features. And also, I found Flux Season 4 to be less buggy. Yes, Flux Season 4 is not perfect, but in EZFN Season 4, you know, there's weird issues where right now, if you get smoke grenades, you can infinitely pop smoke grenades on yourself and create a trail of smoke. Very weird bugs like that are around. You know, there's also the issue with your settings aren't saving. When you leave the game and you reopen it, it goes back to some random state. It's not even the default state. I don't know what's happening there. I'd say it's overall less buggy. However, some, you know, notes against Flux against EZFN, where EZFN, I think, has the upper hand. EZFN generally has more platform support. Also, EZFN shows you the average players in each match, as well as a live queue count, which I think is a big advantage. There's also some 50-50 points where Flux overall has a little bit stronger SMGs, while EZFN has stronger shotguns. Flux also has a little bit more weapons to play with, like dualies, but some of them, like Thermal AR, aren't particularly useful. Also in Flux, you have a progression system, while EZFN, you get most items immediately. One final note as well is I generally find players on Flux are generally a little bit better mechanically. So if you're new, maybe EZFN's a better choice. If you want to play a little more competitive, Flux might be a better choice. Something to think about there. But overall, I think that wraps up my first impressions. I think the key information you should know about Project Flux. Of course, changes may come in. Drum gun may get added. Siphon may get added. So we can talk about that when those features get added in, hopefully. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.